Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Burrows. I just wanted to say that I miss you guys a lot and I can't wait to see you guys soon. I'm here today to talk to you guys about math, and I'm going to take a look at our calendar real quick to let you know which lesson we're going to be looking at. Right now we are going to be talking about the lesson for May 4th, Monday, May 4th, lesson 20.1, Congruent Figures, book pages 408, 409, and homework RWPW 105. What I need for you guys to do before we get started today is have some things ready to go. Obviously, you're going to need a pencil, so make sure you have a pencil. I would also like you to have some clean paper to work on so that we can work together. My paper that I'm going to write on is right here, so we can both write on our papers at the same time. My book, you're also going to need your book. My book I'm going to project up here so that you can see. The other thing I'm going to do is also put it under my elbow so that you guys can see what I'm doing with the pages of the book. I'd like you to have it open to page 408. Get that up there for us. And the last thing you're going to need is your homework packet. Homework packet is for a little bit later so that we can look at our homework for the day. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and look first at page 408. Before I get started, I am going to get my paper ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and get my name on there. All right, here we go. And I'm also going to put the page that we are working on. We're starting on page 408. Okay, there, now I know where I'm at. All right, first things first, let's look at this. There is a word here today that I want to talk about. Right here it says congruent figures. I want to talk about this word right here, congruent. Congruent. We're talking about congruent figures or shapes. Let's take a look down here. Congruent figures have the same size and shape. Figures can be seen in different positions and still be congruent. Now let's take a look at these shapes right here. I see this rectangle and this rectangle, and I'm kind of looking at those. They're the same shape for sure, but are they the same size? I have a feeling if I took this rectangle and turned it and put it on top of that one, they would be exactly the same. They'd cover each other completely. I would say that these two shapes are congruent, same size, same shape. Same things for our triangles down here. I have a feeling if I was able to take this triangle and scoot it over, it would cover that triangle completely. They would be the same shape and the same size. These two pairs of figures are congruent. There's our word again, congruent. Now take a look at our shapes over here. I notice that this shape has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. It's a pentagon. And this shape also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. It's also a pentagon. But I noticed something. First of all, their sides are not similar. Even though they both have 5, they are not the same shape. And this one looks a little bit bigger, so they're not the same size. Even though they're both pentagons, they are not congruent because they don't have the same shape or the same size. Now take a look at these two shapes down here. I notice both of these shapes have straight sides. They're polygons. They both have 4. They're both quadrilaterals. But something else I notice is they all have right angles. Every single angle in here is a right angle. But there is one thing I do notice. This shape, all 4 sides are equal length. This one, they're not. They aren't the same size, and they really aren't the same shape if you think about it. They could match that they both have right angles, but they don't have the same length sides. So I don't think these are going to be congruent. They are not the same size or the same shape in some levels. So these pairs of figures are not congruent. So keep in mind, congruent figures are the same size and the same shape. Now I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the page. I'm going to come over here and give you guys another example real quick of congruent shapes and congruent figures. Okay, here I have 2 different rectangles. They're both green. Here are my rectangles. Here's my first one. Here's my second one. And I want to see if these guys are congruent. Now, just taking a look at both, they're both rectangles. I notice they are quadrilaterals. They both have 4 sides. They also have right angles. All of them are right angles. If I was able to take this shape and move it, let's see if it's congruent. Does it completely cover the other one? It does. These two shapes are congruent. Same size and exact same shape and size. So those two shapes are congruent. Now I do have another rectangle up here. Here's a big one. Big orange rectangle. Now I I noticed this rectangle, same thing, it's quadrilateral, it has 4 sides, and all 4 sides have right angles. And here's my other rectangle down here. Now I noticed both of these rectangles are quadrilaterals and they have right angles. Are they congruent though? If I took this shape and set it on top of this one, are they the same size? No, they're not. So these are not congruent. Even though they're the same shape, they're not congruent. Same shape and same size. Now, before we get any farther, I would like to write that down on our page so that we don't forget. All right, let me get back up here. Start with our word congruent. I'm going to go ahead and bring page 408 back up so we can look at that word again. Congruent, and I'm going to go ahead and write it up here on my paper. Congruent. C-O-N-G-R-U-E-N-T. Congruent. Congruent shapes are the same size. I'm going to make the word size in capitals. Same size and shape. All right, so here we are. Congruent shapes or figures are the same size and shape, so keep your eyeballs peeled for those today. All right, now we've already talked about the shapes on this page. The 2 rectangles were congruent, the 2 triangles are congruent, but we also talked about why these 2 pentagons were not congruent and these 2 quadrilaterals were not. Now, I'm not going to worry about what we have down here at the bottom of the page because it's talking about pattern blocks and you guys don't have those with you. So I'm going to be done with page 408. What I am going to do though is scoot over to page 409 in my book. And let's take a look at that today. It's going to give us some different shapes to check out to see if they are congruent. Now, it says you can tell if 2 figures are congruent by tracing one figure and placing it over the second figure. If one figure covers the other exactly, they are congruent. Okay, I'm going to move away from this page and I'm going to go over to my Elmo. I'm going to take this down and put my Elmo up, and I want you guys to take a look. I'm going to take my book with me and my clean sheet of paper. And we'll talk about this over here. Okay, here's my book. And I'm going to start by looking at figures A and B. Now it's saying to trace and cut out triangle A. I'm not going to cut out triangle A, but I am going to put the paper over it. And I can see right here, let me get my name, I can see on that page, I can see right through it and see shape A. So here we have shape A. I'm going to go ahead and trace shape A onto my paper. Now, that was shape A. And right here in my book, I can see shape B. I'm going to scoot my paper over and see, does it overlap shape B completely? It sure does. So shape A and shape B are going to be congruent. Now let's take a look at C and D. It says trace and cut out square C. I'm not going to cut it out, but I am going to trace letter C on my paper. I can see it through my paper. Okay, there's letter C. And I notice over here under my paper, I can see letter D through the paper. I'm going to scoot my paper over. And is it the same as letter D? No, I'm seeing letter D is a little bit bigger on the outside. So looking at that, that tells me that shape C and D are not congruent. They do not match. Okay, now I'm going to come over here and I'd like to take a look at number 1. Let's take a look at number 1 over here. I'm going to go back over to my paper in a minute and I want to take a look at number 1, 2, and 3. It says to trace and cut out each pair of figures. We don't need to cut them out. We can just trace them and see it through our paper. And we need to tell if the figures are congruent, right? Yes or no. Now on my paper up here, I didn't get a chance to write. I believe it was letter A. We've discovered that letter A was the same size as B, but letter C sure was not the same size as letter D. Now I'm going to go to number 1. I'm going to come over here to number 1, and I'm going to look at this first shape. It looks like I have another pentagon. Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. Go ahead and trace that and see if we have a congruent shape. Okay, here we are. Here's number 1. I'm going to go ahead and write a number 1, and we can get started. Now I'm noticing here on number 1, I can see it through my paper. I'm going to trace the first one. Okay, there's my pentagon. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. Now, I notice the second pentagon is right here. They don't match shapes when I slide it over, but what if I turn my paper around? Oh, okay, I can see it through there. It matches that second shape perfectly. So for number 1, I'm going to say yes, they are congruent. Let me get caught up on my paper. Let's see, they are congruent there. Okay, I drew my shape, I traced it. I traced my shape, and I was able to turn it, and I noticed that yes, it is congruent. It matches the next shape. So number 1 was yes. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at number 2. Number 2 also has a shape for us to check out. Let's try it. I'll go back to my Elmo here, looking at my book. Okay, number 2, we have a triangle, it looks like. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and scoot my paper over. Here is number 2. And I can see through my paper right here, this triangle. I'm going to trace it. Okay, go ahead and trace it on your paper. And I'm going to scoot it over. I see the other triangle right here underneath. I'm going to scoot it over. Well, it doesn't match if I scoot it over, but what if I turn my paper around? Let's see here. I'm going to look again. There's the first shape, there's the second one. Oh, you know what? It lines up perfectly. I can see it perfectly under there. Matched perfectly. So for number 2, yes again, we have a congruent shape. Okay, let me get caught up on my paper over here. For number 2, I drew the shape again, and I scooted it over. And it didn't match when I scooted it over, but if I turned my paper around, it matched. So yes, number 2 is also yes. Okay, now let's try number 3 and see if it's congruent. I'm going to go back to my Elmo and my paper here. Okay, number 3 has 2 circles. Now, on number 3, I'm just going to say, let's take a look at that real quick on number 3. And what do you guys think? Take a good look at that. Now, when we're talking about being congruent, we have already talked about how it has to be the same size and the same shape. Now, I can tell just by looking at number 3, those are the same shape. They're both circles. But if I took this shape and scooted it over, or the little circle and scooted it over, would they match perfectly? No, this circle is much, much bigger. So I don't even really have to draw that one. I can just see that if I scoot this over, it is not going to be the same size. Remember, when we are doing congruency, both have to be the same size and the same shape. So for number 3, I'm going to put no. They do not match. Even though they're the same shape, they're not the same size. Okay, now after number 3, I want to take a look at number 4. I'm going to back out of my Elmo right now, and I'm going to put the page back up so we can see those. And let's talk about this down here. Sometimes when you have shapes and you're talking about congruency, you really, really need to look at the shapes. Now I'm going to take a look at number 4. On my paper for number 4, it's still asking, Joe says that the 2 figures below are congruent. Do you agree? Explain. So let's take a look at number 4. Do you agree? Here's our question. Says that the 2 figures below are congruent. Do you agree? Explain. Now there's our question. Do Do you agree and explain? Let's find out what he's talking about. He says that they are congruent. Now let's take a look at the two shapes first. I see a rectangular shape, and this one actually looks like it's got solid figures. It's not just a flat plane shape. It has tops and bottoms and sides. And if I look very carefully, I can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cubes there. And then I'm going to come over here and I see tops and sides again, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cubes again. It looks to me like if I took this shape and laid it on its side, or took this shape and put it up, they would look exactly the same. So, do you agree? Are they congruent? Yes or no? If I was to put both of those together, yes, they would be congruent. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about our answer for number 4. I'm going to go ahead and come over here. Here's my answer for number 4. Do you agree? Yes. Now, let's think about what we are going to say. Yes, we agree. And we said that when we looked that both shapes had 6 cubes, and they are both arranged in a rectangular pattern. Both of them made a rectangle. So the way they are arranged is both shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my answer. Both shapes have 6 cubes. Okay, so we said both shapes have 6 cubes. Both of them have 6, and both are the same rectangle. Okay, they are the same rectangle. 6 cubes, both shapes have 6 cubes, and both are the same rectangle. They have the same size cubes and the same size shape. So yes, they are. Okay, now number 5. We're going to have to go back to the Elmo and take a look at this shape before we get started. What it says is, write about it. Copy this figure on grid paper, draw a congruent figure, then explain how you know the figures are congruent. Now, I want to take a look at this on my Elmo so that we can actually copy this off of our paper, off of our page onto our paper. And this is going to get a little tricky because we have to think about where the shapes are, where the squares are put together, and how it's made. Now, before we start here, I wanted to notice that this particular shape has some squares in it. These aren't cubes, they're squares this time. And I see 1 there, 2nd square, 3rd square, 4th square, 5th square. So I see 5 squares. And I notice that I have 3 squares together in the middle, 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. Oops, it's starting to move again. Okay, let me get out of this. And I am going to go back to my Elmo so that we can look at this in the book. Okay, let's take a look at that. First things first, again, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look through my paper for number 5. Let's see, I'm right down here with number 5. And if I squish my paper over the top, I can see those squares. Okay, here's 1 square, another square underneath it, and then I'm going to look again. Okay, there's 3 squares together in the middle. So there's the 2nd square and the 3rd square, and then I have 1 square underneath. Okay, and let me check this, make sure it matches. Let's see, make sure this matches here. Okay, I had 1 square on the top, 1, 2, 3 across the middle, and 1 underneath. Okay, now what I need to do is figure out how I can make the same shape but a little bit differently when we look at it. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my page a little bit. turn it this way just a little bit, sideways, and then look through my paper again and see if I can see that again. Okay, I'm gonna start again. Remember, we had one square on top, one underneath, and in this middle row I had 3 squares across, and then underneath that I had 1 down below. Okay, let me check to see if I match that. I had 1 square on top, 1, 2, 3 across the middle, and 1 down below. Okay, all I did was I turned my paper a little bit and rewrote that shape. Now look, it looks a little bit different, it's in a little different position, but it's the same shape. 1 and then 3 in the middle, 1 down, 1, 3 in the middle, and 1 down. I just made a congruent shape. If I was to take this shape, if I could cut it out and turn it, I could make it match perfectly on that other shape. So there we have another congruent shape. Now, I'm going to stop right there with the math book. And what I would like you to do right now is find your homework paper packet, and let's take a look at that. We're going to find our homework today and start looking at that. I'll give you guys a second to check it out. Okay, let's see. Where are we? Okay, here we are. RW 105 is the first one you're going to need to find. Okay. Here we are, and I found it in my packet, and we're going to take a look at it up here. Let me know if you guys make sure you're ready there. This is the one we're looking at. And before I get started even today, I'm going to get my name on there so I know it's mine. Okay, now let's take a look at what we talked about today, that word we were discussing earlier, that word congruent. Congruent figures, remember, congruent figures have the same size and shape. They have to be exactly the same size and the same shape. Remember back to the other rectangles I talked to you about. We had the 2 green rectangles, same size, same shape, but then we had the orange rectangle and the green rectangle. They are the same size, or same shape, but they are definitely not the same size. So keep your eyes peeled. Let's take a look at the homework right now. Take a look at A and B. Now just looking at those, if I was to trace A and scoot it over, it would match probably triangle B. Okay, let's take a look at that. It says trace and cut out triangle rectangle B. I don't think we need to cut it out, but we can sure trace it. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my Elmo so that you guys can see it. Let's see here so that you can see. I'm definitely going to get my marker back out. Let me get this book out of the way and we'll give this a whirl here. All right. There's my homework page. Let's get this a little bigger so you can actually see it. Okay. Here we go. Here's my first part. Get this out a little bit. Okay. Remember we said the congruent figures have the same size and shape. Now let's take a look at letter A and letter B. I'm going to take that same paper I was using for my assignment, and the same paper I was using before, and I'm going to stick it over triangle, or I guess it's rectangle A, and I can see it through there. Go ahead and trace rectangle A. Okay, there it is. And I'm also looking through and I can see rectangle B under there. I'm going to scoot it over. And if I look through those, they match pretty closely. They match pretty closely. So I would say that triangle and A and triangle B are congruent. Now I can just tell by looking at C and D. They are the same shape, but are they the same size? Nope. So triangle C and triangle D are not congruent. Now, some of these you can just tell just by looking at. Let's try number 1. Take a look at A and B, and if you're absolutely not sure, you can definitely take that paper again and trace it. If I take my page and I trace it again, looks like we have a trapezoid here. Okay, or a parallelogram I should say, and scoot it over. Yep, it looks like it matches perfectly. So for letter A and B, it says write yes or no to tell if the shapes are congruent. I'm going to say yes. Take a look at number 2. I see the same shape, but are they the same size? If you said no, you would be correct. Now I'm going to let you guys think about 3 and 4 on your own. See what you think. Be careful with number 3. If you need to trace, you can. And then on the back, let's take a look at some of these answers here. Now, up at the top of number 1, it asks you a question, so don't forget to fill in number 1. It says, blank figures have the same size and same shape. What did we say that was? Congruent. It's right there, so we should be able to spell that correctly. Let's go ahead and put that down for number 1. Congruent. All right. Okay, congruent figures have the same size and shape. Now, I'm going to help you with number 2, but I do think the rest of the page you're probably going to be able to do on your own. Let's look at number 2. It says to compare figures A and B. Are the figures congruent? Explain. Now take a look at A and B. Now, first things first, are they the same shape? No, and they definitely are not the same size. So I'm going to put no. Now let's explain why not. First of all, I'm going to start by saying the shapes are not the same size or shape. Okay, so in this case, they weren't either thing. They were not the same size, and they were not the same shape. Now be careful with number 3. Be careful here. It's asking the same things. Are the figures congruent? Explain, yes or no, and I want to know why it is not or it is congruent. Now, I think you guys can probably do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on your own. And let's take a look at number 10 and 11 down here just to talk about. It says write the following numbers from least to greatest. Least to greatest, so we're talking smallest to biggest. And number 11, Mark buys a book for $5.95. He gives the clerk $10. What was his change? Now think about it. He gives 10 and he gets 5, buys a book for $5.95. Are we going to be adding or subtracting there? Think about how you're going to do your problem. Okay. Third graders, that was lesson, I believe it was lesson 20.1 about congruent figures. Last thing I'm going to say is remember congruent figures are same size, same shape. Good luck. Thank you.